We have a guest today who I am very excited about, somebody I've been a fan of for a long time in multiple domains. His name is Clint Lowery, and he's most known as a musician. He's a guitarist, singer, and songwriter with Sevendust. He's also done a lot of solo work. I personally love his solo work. Um, and the reason I wanted to bring you on the show today, Clint, is your lyrics have meant a lot to me, and I'm I don't listen to a lot of music with lyrics, to be honest with you, because a lot of it swings too far in one direction, meaning it's either too happy and upbeat, and I'm like, I just simply don't relate to this at all. Or it's like it's so far in the opposite direction that it's like it's a little bit ridiculous. And I want like 80/20, meaning like I want it to capture and reflect the hardships and challenges of life, but there's got to be little glimmers of hope in there, or it's just too much for me. And not a lot like hits that sweet spot for me. And of the relatively small amount of music that does, a lot of those songs were written by you. Your songs like Xmas Day, The World Is Dead. Those are just like that's my zone. So I
Right.
could tell just by listening to your lyrics, I'm like, this guy just gets it. And but it's not just that you like want to wallow in the darkness and sadness. It's like, here's what I'm facing, and I'm trying to figure something out about it. And I just wanted to not talk to you about music, but talk to you about basically your journey through that.
Oh man. First, Scott, thank you. Thanks so much for having me, dude. And you know, I it's ironic because when I listen to music and I listen to like someone like Soundgarden or someone that's just like vocally or musically just interesting to me, it's actually the lyrics that are the last thing that I get into. And then there are those people that have the words that they write a lyric. You're like, oh, that's exactly how I feel. That he or she just put that in a way where I can relate to that deeply. So I was always intrigued by that, but it was always kind of a melody first. Melody and music pulls the listener in on the heartstrings, and then there's this opportunity we have as artists to do that and say the thing that you want to say you can't really express. And some people hit that target so much. I wouldn't call myself poetic or anything, but one thing I learned at an early age was be vulnerable, be say those things that are in your mind. You don't have to be poetic, you just have to say it exactly the same way that thought comes through your brain. And sometimes I'll say a line, and there's some of it that just kind of sings well, and it just sound. You put some words together, and they sound kind of cool, and then you make sense of it later. But then there are some. I find the best songs and the best lyrics come when I have a target topic. I have some kind of a down and out situation, which unfortunately I was, exposed to a lot of trauma, a lot of things growing up that just gave me a ton of, you know, ton of wells to pull from. Um, and you just choose as an artist to express that or not. And there is so much therapy in doing that. And then when someone says that they relate to it, that is the ultimate payoff. That is when, because I know how it feels. There's been artists that have reached my soul and helped me through things. And so that's what I really want to do. And I think the best way to do it is to do it as authentically as you can, and really just say what it is. Don't try to get too clever and Yoda with it. Just say what it is that's on your mind. If that makes any sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. The word you used, vulnerability, that's exactly the sense that I get listening to your music is there's no polish nor exaggeration. It's just like, here's what I see, here's how I feel. And listening to it, I'm like, I think this guy kind of sees things fairly similar to how I do, meaning like you see a lot of pain and hardship and trauma, but you also see parts of the world that you love and want to interact
Yeah.
with. And it's that dichotomy of like holding both of those and experiencing both of those at the same time. And it's a tough balance to find. I think it's kind of a similar balance I try to find in my content, which is I want to acknowledge how bad things can be and how much this can hurt, but I don't want it to be just that, because I do believe there's always hope for everybody, and I want to make sure I capture that too, but then in a non-cheesy way. It can be
It's a
hard to do.
It is, and you had mentioned early on the 80/20. Like, there, I want we can get into the dark, muddy grit of it, and then give me a solution somewhere. And I always try to have like the second verse of a song is usually the way out, or like the little bit of light, because I'm interested in that too. There's a lot of emotion in that, happiness too. Um, I have to believe that there's a way out of everything that you go through, one way or the other. There is some type of solution. Even in the seeking of that solution is better than wallowing in and not having any hope and not having just trying is something. Just trying to dig yourself out of those holes emotionally, physically, everything.
Yeah. And that's essentially what I'm hoping to talk to you a little bit about today is what some of the things you have found in your own life are that have helped you dig out of those holes. Because obviously I don't know, I look at your Instagram, you never know what someone's life is really like looking at their social
Right.
media, but I, I know you've been through some dark times and I see where your life is at right now. And it seems like you've pulled some things together and things are heading in a pretty good direction for the most part. And I just want us to kind of converse about how you were able to do that. And I think a good starting point would be, if you don't mind, just a little bit of backstory. Like what are some of the challenges you faced mental health wise? We don't need to get into war stories or anything like that, of course, but just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
First off, I got sober in 2007, which that in itself was a huge growing spurt emotionally, physically. A lot of things came together. So that just removing the drugs and the alcohol, and then being willing to get information and peel some layers back and get into some of the traumas, some of the secrets, just kind of expose all that. So that was a huge chapter of my life that was very beneficial in terms of my mental health. Fell deeply into physical activity. I really honestly believe that physical activity is a huge um, ally in therapy and mental health. Just getting yourself in a better headspace. I really do believe being active, and we all see the same things on social media, and that they say that, but it's true. And um, so that was one section. I had a good amount of years, 16 years of a pretty, not, I want to say comfortable life, but I felt pretty stable. I'd have the stressors and things like that, but then I didn't realize how much ego and how much self-absorbent behavior that was happening, and not on. I wouldn't go as far as narcissistic, but there was something that once this health issue occurred, I didn't realize how much work I needed in those areas, and that being my service for others, judgment of others, all these, just things that kind of kept me in a discontent,
Mm.
kind of like not fulfilled. So I had this tremendous health scare about a year ago. It started with a neck injury and then ended up being some neurological things, really the kind of stuff that shakes you to the core. And that occurred. Um, Still dealing with a few things, but that put me into my faith with Christ, and I got saved and got into the scripture, and just that opened up another compartment for me in terms of hope, and um, realizing that it was, that I had gone through so much, many tests and all these things, couldn't get any answers anywhere. Started going to therapy to kind of treat the anxiety that was based around all these things, doing a lot of as much as I could. And through that process, through my faith with God and what that means to me, and through going through the therapy, which what my therapist was a Christian as well, but not that any therapist has to be that, but it aligned to what I was going through at that time. So I grew expeditionally. Is that the right word? Did I say that right?
Exponentially.
Thank you.
I mean, expeditionally, probably it kind of probably felt like an
I'm like,
expedition. I think that
yeah, like an
works too.
expedition with a boat and yeah. Now, I wouldn't even go as far as boasting about that. I grew enough to get through, and I'm telling you, it was the darkest year of my life. And what it armed me with was tools that will despite what I face or anyone faces, there, and we're all going to face some pretty gnarly things before it's over with. I mean, I don't wish what I've gone through on anyone, but it was the biggest gift that was given to me by God, I think, and just by life, to have that adversity, to have that fear, that have that humility. And it shook me so much to where I really took a full inventory of myself, what the way I treat other people, the way I view other people, the critical spirit that I was carrying around. And it just melted those things. And all these things that I would worry about and complain about were minimized. And we have this brief amount of time on earth. And I just chose to stay in faith, improve my relationships, improve my connections with the fans that come to see the shows, make eye contact, get into an actual conversation that is, and it's been wonderful. On one side, I had these dark fears and all these things that are still kind of brewing. On this other side, I had this shield and I had this just a process to handle those things. So no matter what comes my way, I was given just enough suffering, just enough pain, just enough uncertainty to say, you know what, you don't know what's going to happen. Do the best with what you have and appreciate what you have while you have it. And that's truly, all the cliches thrown in one bouquet, you know?
So it sounds like there's really been, you kind of say four big picture things that have been sort of your big turning points, right? Sobriety, fitness, service to others, and faith. Is that a fair summary?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I 100% align with all of those. And I want to talk a little bit more about the importance of each of those in the role of mental health.
Yeah.
We can just kind of go in the order you brought them up in. And that was probably chronological order of your life, right?
Yeah.
Sobriety is one that I talk about a lot on here too. And even in the context of whether a person has struggled with what they would consider to be, addiction or dependence on drugs and alcohol or not, I think anybody with a chronic mental health condition would probably be well served by sobriety. Because even if it's not something that you're going to feel like you have to do every single day, the the sort of ripple effects of even, one night, for example, you're not going to sleep as well. You're not going to feel like being active or being social the next day. And if you're prone to, panic attacks or depressive episodes, sometimes all it takes is one bad day or one bad night to throw you off for
Mm.
weeks or months. And the way I often conceptualize it is, for me, like, mental health feels like a war that happens inside of me, basically. And my enemy is strong, and my enemy can take any little foothold that I give it, like my dark thoughts. If I give an inch, it will take a mile.
Yes, sir.
And so sobriety, I've struggled with my fair share of addictions, oddly enough, not to drugs or alcohol, but plenty of other things for whatever reason. But I also personally am sober because, for the reasons I just said, essentially, that all it takes is one little misstep for me, and my brain's not working right anymore, and then things kind of fall apart.
Yeah. That's interesting too. Um, I think a lot of, in terms of just statistically, the amount of people that drink is kind of falling down. I think people are kind of realizing that there's this data that's coming in that, especially on the mental health side. I mean, you're not doing yourself any favors. That hangover, there's something about a hangover that, if you are, like you say, if you have issues, if you have any of those mental health, man, talk about putting a magnifying glass on anxiety, depression, guilt. And the alcohol is very attractive and the drugs are very attractive in that, because it can dilute that for a moment. And sometimes that moment is just so you want just some type of relief. So that was the case, my case. So all the stuff you said, man, it's worth something, just to kind of, if you're not a problem drinker or alcoholic and you have mental health, if you have depressive, that some of those depression, anxiety disorders, whatever, and you drink socially, it's worth trying to say, hey, let me give it 7 days and just see if that improves. of course, everyone's going to benefit from it right away, but I don't think people realize how drastic um, continual sobriety. I mean, not just a few days, but like months, and what how the brain rewires and the sleep, the long. I couldn't believe all the stats I hear about losing one night of bad sleep, what it does to you, and
It's
on a
horrible.
cellular level, it's crazy.
Yeah. I also something I think about a lot with regards to sobriety is the sorry, I just lost my train of thought. It'll come back if I'm just patient for a second. This happens.
Yeah, welcome to my world.
Oh, what was I saying? I was simultaneously thinking about that and fitness, and I lost my train of thought. Maybe it won't come back. This part probably won't make the final cut.
I hope it does because this is the most human.
Show the human side, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, you know.
I usually do minimal edits on my videos unless I have like a sneezing fit or something, which I do pretty much every day because seasonal allergies. But
Yeah, I had one a while ago, actually.
oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you live, by the way? What part?
I'm
You're in the
St. Louis.
okay. You're not too far away. I'm in Iowa, so we're not
All
too far.
right.
Probably similar climate.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It is for sure.
Ah, it was a good one too. I felt real good about that one. I don't think it's gonna come back. I think it's gone.
What were we talking about previously? We were like, I think I babbled in too
I
long and then you
remember. It's
lost it.
back. It's back.
All right,
Okay.
let's go.
There's this
Eh,
psychologist, Janina Fisher. She's a trauma psychologist, and she talks about, she calls them survival resources and creative resources. And survival resources are things, it was when you said, like, for a little bit, this is going to make you feel a heck of a lot better. There's going to be a price to pay later, but for a little
mhm.
bit, you're going to not suffer as much. So she talks about things like drugs and alcohol, or for some people, it's self-harm, eating disorders, gambling. These all kind of fall in that same category that they're really powerful resources, and when you use them, they're so powerful that you kind of forget your problems for a little bit. But then they eventually, not only do they not solve whatever the problem of origin was, they over time create their own problems, financial, relational, health. They just increase the level of distress that you're then trying to cope with. But her use of the term survival resource, she uses that term very carefully. And something I've always found interesting because her premise is like, you probably stumbled upon these things during a period of time when you were coping with a lot of stuff from your past and you didn't know a better way yet. And
Mm,
that's not your fault because dealing with depression and anxiety and trauma, it's not common sense. No one's born knowing how to deal with those things. And I think very few of us probably grow up in environments where we're taught how to deal with those things. And so you just kind of stumble along and suffer for a little bit, and eventually you find something and you're like, oh, that makes me feel quite a bit better when I do that thing. Maybe I should do that all the time.
mhm.
And hopefully you get to a point where you have different and healthier coping mechanisms, and that's when you can start to make that switch. But her whole point is like, if you had not found a survival resource, who knows if you'd even still be here today. So it's not about shaming yourself for what you've already done, but looking forward and saying, do I need to continue to rely on this, or do I have better options now? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I've never heard it framed like that. And I'm and in some ways thankful for the alcoholism and the
Yeah.
that part of the path because had I not explored that, had I not hit the bottoms I hit with that particular issue, I wouldn't have I wouldn't have found the people, the solutions, the coping mechanisms I have. I wouldn't have found any of those things at all. Um, so yeah, for that I am grateful. I don't think people need to experiment as deeply as I did.
Sure.
But I think there's some natural things like with with alcohol or some of the social lubricant aspects of it. I was insecure, didn't know how to talk to people, felt lesser than most of my life. So the alcohol and drugs just kind of put me back up there with everyone else. And there's a lot of slippery slopes in that area. But I've never, I think that you're right. That and some of us in the particular program I'm associated with always say, that's that's the best that that person has right now. That's the only way that's all they have to handle the situation. and talking about other people that are still out there actively using drugs and alcohol. You just have to meet them where they're at. That is just how they handle it, and also there's an empathy side because I remember being, well, when I get happy, I drank. When I was sad, I drank. When I did it, it was just, that's the only thing I had. And so now I have this information and humility to accept that there's more information to come. And
Yeah.
as you age, as your environment and people change, you have to adapt. And when I say you, I mean me. I think everyone has their own individual path and coping mechanisms and everything. So I try to be mindful of that. I don't like to sit on any kind of a soapbox because I am absolutely learning to do the best I can with what I have.
Yeah. That's exactly how I try to present it too. It's not, I try to always come across not here's what you should do, but
Right.
or, here's what I did and I got good or bad out. Some of
Yeah.
it's a cautionary tale, like I did this and I do not recommend it. Others is like
Sure.
things got better when I did this. But yeah, I try to stay away from sounding prescriptive and more just, we're just here to tell our stories and
Yeah.
tell people what's changed the course or changed the game for us. And that's all anyone can really do because everyone is so different. There are going to be individual variables in everybody's story. You mentioned fitness being another big one for you, and that's for me. I think that was the first one, and that was huge for me because when my depression first got really bad was like early adolescence, like 13. And I
Hmm.
used to be a really active, outdoorsy kid, and that just came right to a halt. And I got very skinny, like not in a good way, very sickly. I was nocturnal. I was living like a vampire, and I like
Hmm.
didn't love the outdoors, didn't do anything. And interestingly enough, here's a fun fact: your brother Corey actually was kind of like one of my motivators for fitness because I remember was on this family trip. This is in the '90s, so this is back in the Discman era. And I had
Yeah.
a couple. I had bought like we were on this long like 9 hour car ride, so I'd gone bought a few rock and metal albums before to get me through the trip, and a couple Stuck Mojo albums. And I remember
Mm.
listening to they're kind of lyrically a little more upbeat, I think, than the average metal band.
Yeah.
Like this is kind of like motivating. And I was looking through the liners, and I looked at Corey and Rich. I'm like, holy crap, that's what these guys look like.
Yeah. There was a certain particular era they were like all in, like
Yeah.
yeah, super fit and muscular, and Corey was throwing people off stages over his head, and it was crazy. Yeah, I could see how that would be motivating for sure.
It was, and I came back from that trip, and I'm like, I need to join a gym, and it was like just this dramatic. It was like just a perfect storm situation, I think, but it's just this dramatic 180. Me and my friend joined a gym, and I remember after a couple months. Now, I'm like 18 years old in this scenario, so you mentioned, earlier on in your story, there's been, some vanity and ego, a lot of that for me here too. But I remember looking in the mirror one day, I'm like, that's me, like
Yeah.
that can happen. And it was effective for me on two levels because on one level there's the physiological brain changes that go with like actually using your body, which I hadn't done in about 6 years, and your
Hmm.
brain really isn't healthy if you aren't moving. But then there was also, I remember getting this feeling of like, if I can change this, because I was so insecure about my body, I mean just hated it. And I remember like, if I can change that, I wonder what else I could change. And that just opened up a whole new world for me for not feeling so helpless or powerless anymore. Is that kind of how it was for you too, or was yours a little bit different?
No, it was that way. It was a confidence that came with being routine, being disciplined with fitness. There's the obvious vanity, looking at myself in the mirror a lot, and then it became a thing where if I didn't do it, I was irritable, and the stress management, the benefit of that, I really noticed that early on. I was like, man, this is um, the endorphins and all the things that kick off on chemically in your body when you work out, and all those things. And then there's the side. It's hard to not become addicted to fitness as well, because there's been times in my sobriety with my family where I would work out 2-3 times a day in the name of mental health, and what I was really doing was avoiding certain aspects of my life, and or not avoiding but just too self-absorbed in the fitness, and so there's a balance there as well that I learned. Especially when you have things happen like torn meniscus, where you get pulled out of that, you say, man, I was really relying on that. I didn't have anything else. I was kind of like, that was my crutch in life. So when you get that taken away, it's good. It helps you again through the suffering and the downtime, helps you find these other coping mechanisms. And then the similarity between the routines, the reps of that you apply to reading, to meditation, to, all these other things. If I do this, and it's going to be slow and painful at first, but I'll eventually get better. It's that rhythm of fitness and continual work and continual growth. You apply that to everything else in life, and what you see the changes, so that process does work and can work with other things. I became a way better reader when I joined a book club with these three other guys, and never read full books, when I was young, maybe a couple, but then now, I read a book a month, and it changed, and it became like another thing, that just another outlet, another way to calm my mind. So a lot of self-help books, and then there would be fiction, and even just that process was helpful for me mentally. But it was all, fitness was like the first, like the foundation of that.
Yeah, it was. You mentioned discipline, and that's definitely a big piece of it for me too. Because it's that, like I said, that was the first time, you kind of said this too, like that I saw proof that I could do hard things. I was very work avoidant before. I was like allergic to hard work. I just didn't ever want to try at anything. Just like, no,
Yeah.
that's too hard. And when I first started getting into it, me and my buddy and my brother, we go to the gym, lift weights, then we like go home, eat like hungry man meals, and stay up till 3 in the morning. And we're like, we're probably doing this correctly. And then I read up a little bit more on it. I'm like, oh, if I really want this to like produce anything, I also need to eat well and sleep more than 3 hours
Sleep.
a night.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wasn't I wasn't motivated to do those things until I realized like this will help with my fitness. And that's kind of what got me on track there and made me and only then did I realize, oh, I think I have been exhausted for 6 years because I haven't been sleeping. Like I've been nocturnal, but also just not sleeping and eating one big meal a day. And yeah, it's not good for your body or your brain to live that way. But yeah, I agree with what you said. There have been a lot of branching effects from that kind of centerpiece of fitness as like the first thing where I really saw I can change, I can
Yeah.
do hard things, I can set a goal and work towards it. And if it doesn't happen in a day, I can keep doing it. I used to be very impatient. Well, I still am impatient, honestly, on the inside anyway, but I can feel impatient and act with patience. Whereas prior to starting my fitness journey, I would say I did not have that ability.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so interesting. Just the process. I think when you're younger, you can compensate. When you're younger, you can sleep 3 hours, still train, and be super functional. Time and age start taking away some of those options. So you really have to be strategic on how much you train, how much you read, how much you do. You know, and then now there's naps that are pretty crucial to me. um, you know, but that meditation piece is one I still struggle with, but as one of the most underrated things in terms of just settling the nervous system down. I've been in fight or flight for a year and been working my way through that still at times because whatever physical things I have going on, when I get anxiety ridden or just kind of anxious, it just exasperates those things. So I'm really just fighting battle on two sides with the same medicine, which is meditation, prayer, fitness, and all those core things, but just trying to be mindful of it. And also, I'm 53. Things are going to happen. Things are going to break down, and just try not to, try to find the things I can do and do them.
It's amazing how much of what we struggle with, I think, we as people, just in general, just honestly comes down to like not taking great care of ourselves. It's such a hard thing to do. I mean, it's
Mm,
not it's not complicated. It's just hard to prioritize because we
it
have
is.
we have so many other things we could be doing, especially now. We got literally unlimited entertainment every second of every day. And it's hard to make the decision of like, should I meditate or should I like watch the entire world doing crazy stuff? And
Yeah.
it's hard to bring it back to like, what do I really what's really going to pay off for me tomorrow or in a week? Um,
Mm.
but I really believe that the foundational aspects of our self-care, taking care of our minds, our bodies, and our spirits, is ultimately what needs to be a high priority in our lives if we want to be healthy beings, because we don't this world takes a toll on us physically, mentally, and spiritually. Just being here is hard and it takes a toll, and we have to recover from that and we have to recharge from that. And it's so easy to think that we're doing that when we're entertained or having fun or mentally stimulated, but not all of that stuff actually moves the needle for us. Now, that being said, you've also mentioned the importance of taking care of others, right? Of service, of not living in a very self-centered way. And I 100% align with that as well. That's something I would say I've learned pretty recently, to be honest with you. I've definitely lived a very self-centered and egocentric life for most of my life. And
Same. Yeah.
yeah, I have definitely fallen victim to the, righteous in my own eyes type of thinking. Like, oh, I'm a good person. I'm doing what I need to be for other people, and kind of doing some of the same stuff you mentioned though, where it's like really prioritizing some of my own stuff, not to a degree beyond what I need. Like on one hand, like, yeah, I need to sleep, but you mentioned like, you know, working out 2 or 3 times a day. Like at some point that maybe becomes self-serving and not just what I actually need. Was there a specific like moment or event in your life that kind of made you shift and realize I need to be thinking about other people more or differently than I have been? Or was it more of just a gradual change over time?
I mean, there were definitely peaks and valleys and dips uh, through my sobriety where I would be very spiritually in tuned and doing service work. And because I mean, that particular program pushes service. And I thought I was doing a level of service, like you said, the same way. Um, but when I really, like I said, when I went through the health stuff, um, where I basically became very isolated because there was no other person on earth that could understand how serious or what I was going, because the doctor things, the tests were coming back clear, and everyone thought I was crazy, and so I was kind of pushed back in this corner of, okay, it's just you and God now. So that made me realize, yeah, for me, reading the scripture and reading these daily devotionals, it really steered toward loving thy neighbor, even the ones that are hard to love. And so there were a few strained relationships, a few things that weren't really in a good place. So I just started, because of what I was going through and thought that I was actually going to die. Um, Started just focusing in on, okay, I can sit here and think about what's getting ready to possibly happen to me, or I can just start. And it could be as simple as being kind to an older, I see a lot of older people. I've always gravitated to older people, something about it. And I just started having these conversations and making myself available for conversations. And the key component would be listening. I wouldn't speak a lot. I would just listen. And it was so hard for me not to, but yeah. And I had that, and one up everybody. And that's a nervous tick of mine when I don't mean to interrupt people, but when they're talking and they say something I really relate to, I just jump all over it. It sounds like one upping, but really ultimately, I think I'm just so excited about relating to someone, but it comes off very disrespectful to interrupt and kind of one up on people. But so I started just having these really other, focusing on other people kind of conversations. And if they asked me, then I would talk. But for the most part, that was a shift, man. Just realizing, okay, mortality's looking you in the face. Go out, and the best way to distract yourself from that is to be of service to other people. and I had to get the hell off the couch. I had to start being a father again. I had to start being a husband again, despite what cards I thought I was getting dealt or will get dealt. I had to start moving. And the best remedy was when I felt like I was helping other people. I was praying with people. My aunt, she was diagnosed with cancer, so I was talking to her every day about her life, and a couple other people. This guy Steve that has terminal lung cancer, but has the best attitude ever. And I just started connecting with all these people with really serious situations, and it wasn't that I was seeking those type of people out particularly. It was just something that God was lining up, and I just started seeing all these things. When when you buy a car and you see that car, you see that car everywhere. That's what it was. I was actively seeking out other people to be of service or to be loving of thy neighbor, and it changed my life, man. It really did, and it still does. And I get so much more out of it.
Man, there's so much in what you just said that I relate to. And I know you mentioned like earlier on being insecure and uncomfortable around people, and that's something I've struggled with my whole life too. I
Yeah,
never really fit in real well. I kind of grew up as like very rural, kind of like a country boy, and then we moved to the city, and it's like no one cares that I'm good at fishing. Like that doesn't make
same.
me
Yeah,
like where I'm from, that would make me very popular, but here no one gives a crap. So
no,
just never really fit in. I was kind of felt like an intruder, like everywhere I went. And you know how middle school and high school is, people don't
yeah,
treat you great if you're not their kind
no,
of person. And so for a long time, I just kind of gave that energy back. I'm like, okay, fine. You guys don't like, okay, I guess I don't like people. If people don't like me, I don't like people. That's just how I'll navigate the world. And it turns out that living that way doesn't make you feel better. It actually just amplifies the anger and the bitterness
hmm
that you've received from them, because then you end up just being that person to somebody else. I know that I'm not proud of this, but sometimes to deflect the what I was getting, I'd kind of deflect it onto somebody else and be, oh, look at that guy. And I feel terrible about some of those decisions now. But
Do
you
you?
also, sorry, go ahead. No, you can.
No, I'm just you just brought up just such a good point. That do you feel like it's an easier emotion to grasp on when you feel rejected that way? Because I felt that way through school, through certain cliques, still to this day. When I'm at a backstage festival and all these really cool band guys and girls are running around, I feel just so weird and awkward around all of those people. So I do the same similar. I have done the same thing where I'm like, I don't like those circles anyway, and it's just an easier emotion to hide behind anger
Yeah,
and bitterness instead
yeah.
of saying, I want to be liked. I want to be, you know, like I was relying on that a lot. So I didn't mean to interrupt you,
No,
but
you're fine.
that was kind of like, do you feel like that emotion is the first go to? Well, you don't like me, I don't like you. Like it's like
Exactly.
the easiest way to cope with that.
Yeah.
I
No,
want to
no,
break up with you first.
exactly. And no, you literally not 5 minutes ago explained why you interrupt. So that's you're good. You had
Yeah,
led up to
exactly.
it. You gave me a really good like you prepared me for it. So it's all good.
Yeah,
No,
exactly.
I think you're exactly right. I think one thing we talk about a lot in like mental health is primary and secondary emotions, because emotions happen so fast in the brain, right? Like technically, this is weird to think about and it creeps me out every time. But the part of your brain that generates your emotions is called your limbic system. The part of your brain that recognizes your emotions is your prefrontal cortex. And there's like milliseconds of latency between those two parts of your brain because they communicate through chemical impulses. In other words, by the time you feel an emotion, it has technically already happened.
That's
You're
wild.
I know it's so crazy. Like it's kind of like physical pain. It's like, if you touch something hot, it's too late to not touch the hot thing. It already hurts. It's already happened. You can't prevent it. And emotions are the same way. By the time you realize you feel an emotion, it has technically already occurred. And then like a millisecond after that, then you have a thought about the emotion. And then you have another emotion about the thought you just had. And so the primary emotion is the way you actually feel about the thing that just happened. And the secondary emotion is the feeling that comes from the thought. So what I think probably happens, and I totally relate to, for you, it's bands. Like I used to work at a hospital, and that's me in a room full of doctors. I'm like, it's like these are actual doctors, and then there's me. Because I wasn't, I
Yeah.
wasn't a very good student for most of. I feel I barely like got into grad school, and I've always felt like I'm not supposed to be here, and someone just took pity on me. And someday the like medical degree police are gonna just break down my door and be like, nope, sorry.
Exactly.
But yeah, so it's like I think at least for me, I don't know if this is the case for you. The primary emotion is more like sadness and rejection. Like I feel that, and then my brain's like, no, I don't want to feel that way. These people, it's they don't deserve me anyway. And then that's when it becomes, yeah, like the aloof, the anger, the I don't like you guys anyway, screw you, I think you nailed it.
No, that it's good to hear it broke down in that way and to understand that there is that chemical thing that happens within that. I love that. I'm fascinated by that because and also it makes me feel a little less crazy when I know that that's just typically on a scientific level how the brain works, how it responds, and why some of these things happen, and then how it happens for a lot of others the same way.
Yeah.
Some people are better at handling it, like you had mentioned. You have internal you're not as patient internally but outwardly, and that's a hard thing to do, that like to actually not act on the emotional impulses that occur in the brain, because there's a lot in my mind that happens that I just try to bite my tongue a lot, and it's a serious practice. It takes time, but once you see a couple of the benefits of not the restraint of pen and tongue, I call it, if I don't emotionally email someone back right away, or if someone says something rude or whatever, I instead of just acting on it, just let it sit for a second. And it's a tough thing to do. Walking when I'm walking behind someone that's walking slow, I'm
Oh, I
like
know.
irritated with them. Like, why are you irritated with them? Like, what? That's just it's just little things like that. I'm just trying to make improvements just so my existence on earth is a little smoother. Because if
Exactly.
a ton of those little things piled up makes for a long day.
It does. It does. And ultimately, I mean, this is backed up by research too, is like living in a self-serving way. Ultimately, it's a pretty shallow well. There's a study, back in like the dark days of psychology, there were some pretty messed up studies that were done. And on one hand, it's like they're terrible, but we got some good data from them. And there was one, I think about this almost every day, where they were shocking people.
Yeah.
And well, there actually have been many studies where they shocked people, unfortunately, but in this particular one, there were two conditions, and one group of so the shocks kept getting worse, right? They got stronger and stronger. One group of people, they said, like basically, you get more money for like the higher level shock you endure. So that like it was basically you get something. In the other condition, this is the really messed up part. They told them that on the other side of that wall, there's another person hooked up to the same machine. And for every shock you take, you're taking their shocks, basically. And the people who thought they were protecting somebody else took way more shocks than the people who were getting money. And that to me, like that's it in a nutshell, is that we are designed and built to care for one another, and that's a part of who we are. And if we're not living that way, or our lives don't have opportunities for that, we're missing a huge chunk of who we can and should be.
Wow, what an interesting study that is. I wonder where I would rate with that. Like
Might be
I
different at
don't.
different phases of life.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. I think I take a fair amount of shocks before I gave in. Money, is a less of a motivator for me now. In this stage of life, it used to be a huge one, but
Yeah.
I chased that too. It was a worldly pursuit. Instead of just trying to do things that fulfill me internally, spiritually, and physically. There's so much, the byproduct of those things usually end up translating into money or some type of security. And where I would just kind of worship these certain things and thinking that that was going to be the end all or be all. And that's a sad thing when, and I think a lot of people deal with that. I'm sure you have too. You accomplish, you get this a certain kind of achievement or goal, and then you realize I'm still the kind of broken person I was before. Then it's like the the I guess the the goal, the ultimate life, what gives life meaning is just finding the peace and finding the love for other people and trying to enjoy life. You don't have to be joyful to enjoy
Right.
life. It can just be being content. And there were periods of time where just being still was such a impossible thing for me. And it is a huge gift to be able to just sit and be in silence and be okay with it. And that is something I've always wanted. And uh, I get brief moments of that, and I chase after it.
My brain doesn't do real well with that kind of thing either, but I try. And I love what you said about joy. Yeah, because joy, I think sometimes can almost be more of like a mindset. Because there's plenty of days where I don't really feel it in my heart. I'm just like, today's just not feeling like a super joyful day to me.
Hmm.
But I can still have a mindset of gratitude. I can still have a mindset of service, and that can
Absolutely.
be different from my emotional experience. I want to make sure that we get a chance to talk about faith too, because I know that's a really important part of your journey, as it is for mine. Something we kind of have in common. It's apples to oranges, but it's similar, and I bet this is for a lot of people. Is that our turning points came from moments where we realized, like, I'm up against it, and there's nothing I can do personally to move this forward. Yours was with your own health. Mine was with the health of my daughter. So there's
Mm,
a couple, I'll keep them brief, but a couple notches to that story. So she was born with a medical condition, and like we weren't sure if she was going to make it, like instantly. And I've
mm,
never felt so desperate about anything in my entire life. And that was a moment I realized, like, I can't fix this. She's just like, she's in her little, I don't remember what the technical term for it is, but like the incubator thing. I know that's not what it is, but and I'm just looking at her and I'm like, there is no amount of strength or willpower that I can put forth that's going to change this situation. And thankfully that ended up being it. I don't want to say it was a big deal, but it was correctable through surgery. We weren't initially sure it would be, so that was good. But then she also ended up having a disability, so she's autistic. And we noticed when she was about 18 months old, just her development was off. And
mm,
so we brought in some people to kind of help with her. And I remember coming home from work one day because she wasn't walking, and they had her in like this harness thing, and like you have to walk with her, and just seeing her in that was such a humbling moment where I'm like, I've been living for the wrong things. I need to live for I need to be here for my family in a different way than I have been, because I was kind of falling into the typical dad husband thing. Like I go to work and make money. This is my contribution. It's like, that's, yeah, you need to do that, but that's not enough. And so really I credit her more than anything with bringing me to service and bringing me to faith. Because for most of my life, I would say I was probably an agnostic, probably even had
mm.
some years in my darkest moments where I'd say I was an atheist. And um, definitely have had some recent events in my life that have brought me to seeing that there's much more to it than that.
Yeah. First off, man, I'm sorry to hear about that. But I'm happy that you guys got on the other side of it and she's here. And even with some of the challenges, there's amazing processes to deal with it, with being autistic. And unfortunately, there's that number increases a lot in terms of people dealing with that. But there's also with that a lot of good, you know, I see a lot of growth in that support systems. And but yeah, the faith thing, man. Ultimately, when I was always one foot in, one foot out. A lot of the times, I believe, but I was very intrigued by science and big bangs and all that stuff, and I just knew there was something that I didn't really want to identify it as Christ and God and the Bible as the foundation for it. But like I've heard it say, you don't find faith where God just kind of pulls you in, and I think that it was just time for me to be brought to my knees through the health stuff. But um, I truly believe that we are here to love each other, and we are here, the suffering and these things are going to absolutely happen. Um, and I always wondered how I would deal with it. I've always one of those people that would daydream about these worst case scenarios, like my whole life, even to the point where people, when this started happening to me, like, man, you always talk about this stuff. You always talk about these really brutal uh, scenarios, and I always had these health anxieties, and anytime something would knock me out, I would obsess about how to get better. And but I was looking for like worldly solutions to everything. And then when I finally became a man of faith, I realized how much little control I had, which ultimately made me feel better when you just kind of surrender and say, okay, this is happening to me. There's nothing I can do about it. There's a, you know, there's an acceptance to that. And it's just, and then when you know, if you believe that there's an eternal life, grant you give your life to Jesus Christ, and I believe that is the way, the only way. But I don't preach or look down on anyone else's belief systems. Just as something I believe in, and I speak boldly about it because I used to be scared to speak on it, but because I don't want to offend people, and that that doesn't seem genuine. I would rather someone just speak what they believe, if they really believe it, and as opposed to giving some half version of it. Because if you truly believe, I think part of that is expressing that openly. Um, but I believe I have a mission, and that is to kind of, pass that word on and maybe pull others into it. But just faith and it's at its core is such a, I don't know, when people go through those things, like especially with children. So I had this friend, Braden, he has brain cancer and he's my son's age, and I met him at a show and we text a lot. And he goes through all those things, and it was always like, well, why do kids suffer if there's a God and that loves us? And I'm like, well, it's absolutely the ripple effect of when you have someone like Braden or some kid that goes through this horrific disease and ultimately make their life very extremely hard, or end it prematurely. The strength that we witness when we see these people go through these things, the families that are brought together, the support of the community, all these things, it kind of reteaches us how to have true humanity and love for each other. And I don't have any, when a child like that is going through that, I know, I believe in my heart they're put here to go through that for us to observe, so we can understand our mortality. How can we go out and be helpful to these little soldiers that are stronger than most, the toughest guys I've ever seen walk around? You see a kid deal with something like that, and I'm like, that is true strength. That is bravery. And it's not fair, and it is not right that they have to go through it. And I know, God forbid, anything that happens to my kids, man, and what you've already kind of experienced, I could only, and my son got hurt once when I was in the middle of all my things. My body was freaking out. He got hurt on the football field, and immediately everything that I was worried about myself just went away. It was all about him and getting him better. And um, that's as true. That's as much of understanding of God that I can have when I see my child hurt, and the empathy and the love and the protection and the guidance and the forgiveness, like all those emotions you feel as a parent. That's as close as I'll get to understanding what God is and what His love is for us. And I know I'm just kind of blabbering, but that I just,
I think so.
faith is like the ultimate. It's the ultimate, and it is everything. And I think that it gives you strength, gives you vulnerability, it gives you relatability, it gives you empathy, it makes unlovable people lovable. because I want to do that. I don't want to rehearse arguments in my head and gossip and do all those things that feed, for what? Sit on a deathbed one day and just sit there. I was upset about this, like what, why? What was so, anyway.
No, I 100% agree with everything you've said. And for me, faith is something I've not come by easily. I don't know if I would have been reachable by any human being during my darkest time. No one really tried that hard, to be honest with you. But I
Yeah.
remember, I remember thinking about it and thinking like, if somebody made me and made this life for me, they must hate me. Like, because this feels like I'm being punished for something.
Yeah.
But that ultimately, even though that was a long period of time in my life that I felt that way, but I do see it now as like those are tools that I use to help people and reach people, because
Yeah.
I am the kind of stubborn and self-centered person. If I had not gone through that, I would have no idea how to talk to someone else who was. I wouldn't empathize with them. I wouldn't relate to them. That my brain just doesn't work that way. I have to have felt it to be able to like reach somebody else who's going through it. And so at this
That's
point
it.
now, it's like if that's the price I had to pay to be this person who can show up for other people in that way, whether it's my friends, my family, strangers, people who I see at work, I'll pay it every time because that's what I'm here to do.
That's it. Think about that. I mean, the experiences you have are gifts you can give to experiences. Like when I talk to someone that has gone through something similar and they've gone through a little more extreme, they're more than willing to say, "Oh man, I've been through it. I have this friend Rich. He's gone through all these uncertain neurological things, and we talk about it. And he's helped me so much." And you genuinely care because you've been through it and you know what it feels like, and not everyone does. And the people that are, so you might as well use that tragedy as information and helping other people get through it too, because man, unless you've gone through it, you don't know. I don't know what it's like to go through what you've gone through, but if I did go through it, I would call you and say, "Hey, Scott,
Yeah.
help me out. Like, what was that? What was it like?" And then it's not in vain. Then it's just not one human being struggling. It's like, okay, they struggle through it. Now, if you're gracious enough to give that experience away to help someone else, ease them, even for a moment, it's powerful.
It is, I agree. And the suffering part's a tough one, like as far as reconciling faith with suffering. And I'm certainly not going to act like I have all the answers to that question. If anybody did, I think they'd be the most famous person in the world probably. But
Yeah, no doubt.
something I think about a lot. You have two kids, right?
Yes, sir.
I have two kids as well. And there are, I'm sure you'll understand what I'm saying here. There are many times in my day when there is no choice that I can make that won't make at least one of them unhappy.
Yep,
Whether it's a
absolutely.
food choice or an activity choice, it's like one of you, at least in your own mind, is going to suffer because of a
Mhm.
direction we go in. So if it's not possible for me to do something that works out well for two people, how do you do it for 8 billion? Like, how, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense. That's just how I reconcile it in my own mind.
No, no. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I mean, first off, it's just the two getting the two. You, what do you want to eat?
Yeah,
Someone's crying, someone's laughing. It is like my daughter and son are so like in a lot
same.
of ways.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, you just gotta try to make the right decision with that. As far as other people, I care less about. I wouldn't say I don't care, but I don't let what other people think about me bother me as much as it used to. I used to be very dependent on getting people to like me and wanting people to be liked, and um, that's not fair to myself because I've been pretty miserable trying to people please, and it's just it's not a good thing to do.
And
It's
it's
hard to not do it.
impossible.
Yeah,
It's hard not to try, but it's also impossible. I used to
yeah,
think
it's
there was some
impossible.
kind of just like neutral stance that I could take where I don't offend anybody, but that doesn't exist, because
Yeah.
if you don't take a stand, you offend people by not taking a stand. So at some point, you just gotta you gotta say, I'm on this side in this matter.
Yeah.
You just gotta say,
I've compromised my moral compass for people just to be comfortable around them, and then I just internally battling because I gave up. I lose my dignity, I lose my self confidence. Just when I'm just try to, someone's saying something that's a little darker than I want, I just say it because I want to be in their good gracious. And then at the end of the day, I get in their good gracious. I'm like, I don't really like this person anyway. I don't want to be aligned with this person. Here I am trying to be, make them feel comfortable, and ultimately, like, giving myself away to be around someone I don't really care to be around in the first place.
so this is, I know this seems like a random topic change, but the health scare you had, is it trending positive? Are things looking good for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I got another appointment with another neurologist. I've seen four of them. I got another one in June. Nothing's gotten worse. Um, I think some things have gotten better. Some things are lingering around. It was very confusing because that herniated disc in my neck, it can cause a lot of weird things. So that was, I had 3 months of like shock going down my arm, and then that kind of went away, and then these other things were happening, and muscle twitches and all these things that are kind of still happening, but they're not getting worse.
Right.
My speech is good. I'm walking, so like there was a fear of ALS and
Hmm.
all
Hmm.
these things. I got a couple EMGs that cleared that. So, um, but I'm active. I'm able to work out and do things. I'm 53, as so it's been a heck of a year, man. Uh, I had so much cortisol in my body for so long. Once I treated the anxiety part of what I was going through to see what physical ailments are still there. Now I'm just kind of managing those, and until they progress into a bad way, I'm just going to keep hoping that they go away. You know,
That's all you can do, right?
yeah, that's all I can do, man. And again, that's not in my control.
Right.
I could do some better things nutrition wise, maybe to make things better. I eat too much sugar, and
Mm.
I work out like crazy, but I don't eat the best. So there's things I can do still to get better. And um, today's a good day. I'm gonna live right here, and I'm speaking with you about really amazing things, and that's where I like to stay.
Yeah, I wish I had booked more time for us today, because I feel like we barely scratched the surface of some of what we talked about. There's a lot of
Uh,
depth with some of these topics, I know, but I hope our conversation spurs something in listeners and helps people find something to hold on to or find some next step to take. Because both you and I, Clint, know in our own respective ways that things can always get better, even when it seems like you're down in a 10-foot pit with no way out, right?
yeah, I mean, there's always someone that's been through worse, man, and
Absolutely.
just have to be grateful for it. And I just, again, man, thank you for what you do. I really enjoy when I see your page pull up with new content. I'm like, all right, let me settle in. And you're one of the good social media, uh, you know, there's all these different things. My algorithm's pretty healthy right now because
Yeah,
I'm like looking for
that
good
takes some
things.
time to get it dialed in.
Oh yeah, I went all in. So the one good thing about it is it figures you out pretty quick. So
Yeah.
it's either stuff like yours or like biblical, or it's like all that stuff's now. So I
Man, I really
appreciate what you
appreciate
do.
that. That's awesome that it's come full circle. Because, like I said, your music, I kind of found it at a dark time, and it was definitely a piece of what helped me move forward. So I'm just honored that we can help and support one another.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Well,
I'm here for it. Thank you.
thank you so much, Clint. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining me today, and I appreciate you.
Likewise, my brother.
All right, take care. See